Welcome to my channel, KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. Today, I will be showing you how I make one of my family's favorite cookies, my macadamia nut white chocolate chip butter cookies. I make these melt-in-your-mouth cookies throughout the year, but I especially like making and serving them at Christmas time as special treats when my friends and family come over. And I also like packing them up and giving them as gifts. I really like these cookies because of the buttery flavor combined with the macadamia nuts and the chocolate chips, and they're so delicious. I decided to make these cookies in my Breville air fryer oven. However, I did encounter a few problems using this kind of oven. I did resolve the issue and figured out how to resolve the problem. So if you want my little secret, you have to keep watching. There is a fair bit of difference in how you bake in an air fryer oven and a regular oven. So in this video, I will give you instructions for how to use and bake in both of these ovens. As Christmas is a really hectic time, I like to make a lot of cookie dough or bake cookies ahead of time. And if you want to know how best to freeze them, just watch to the end. The macronutrient ratio for each of these macadamia nut white chocolate chip butter cookies is 4.4 to 1, with 3.4 grams of total carbs, 2.1 grams of soluble fiber, 0.5 grams of insoluble fiber, resulting in only 0.9 grams of net carbs per cookie. Making cookies or any recipe is much easier if you start by organizing all of your ingredients. And then prepping. I start by chopping up my macadamia nuts to about 1/4 size of the original nut. That's because the smaller pieces of the macadamia nut work better in the cookies. You will also need room temperature eggs, so if you forgot to put them out earlier, all you have to do is put them in warm water until the exterior of the egg is warm to the touch. It should take about 10 minutes. For best results, I also like to sift my dry ingredients. So place a fine mesh sieve over a bowl and drop in your almond flour, and also add one of either whey protein powder or coconut flour. I'm using whey protein powder, the glucomannan, also called konjac root powder, and I find this ingredient to be the best thing to substitute as a binding agent in gluten-free baking. Then add your finely ground salt, and now it's time to stir and sift. Once you've done that, set the bowl aside. The next thing I'm going to use is my stand mixer, and to the bowl, add and combine the room temperature unsalted butter and the finely ground confectioner sweetener. You want to beat for 2 to 3 minutes. This will cream the butter to a light fluffy and pale yellow stage. Once at that stage, and while you're beating, now it's time to add the room temperature whisked eggs, but do add about one at a time and beat for 1 minute to completely combine the egg with the butter. Then add the second egg and beat for 1 more minute. At which point you simply add the dry ingredients. Add about 1/4 of a cup of almond flour mixture at a time. Repeat until you have added all of the dry ingredients and everything is completely combined. Because of the butter, I strongly suggest that you at least once or twice stop and scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl to make sure the butter is well integrated into the dry ingredients. Reduce the speed to medium-low and beat for about 30 seconds to a minute. You want everything to be really well combined. Now it's time to add the ingredients which make this cookie really special. To the bowl with your batter, add the chopped macadamia nuts, then beat lightly to distribute them through the dough as evenly as possible. At this point, add the lemon zest, and while you continue to beat, also add the vanilla and the sugar-free white chocolate chips. To make these cookies, I like to use a 1 tablespoon scoop because it makes a perfect size cookie. So scoop out the dough, remove the excess from the scoop, and roll into a ball. Place each of these balls onto a parchment-lined cookie sheet. Repeat until you have used up all of the dough. But before baking, place the tray of cookie dough into the freezer for 30 minutes. You want this cookie dough to be frozen to a solid before baking. and the resting time will also allow the flavors to combine and develop better. The reason for baking these butter cookies from a frozen state is really important, and that's because if you don't freeze the cookie dough, when they bake, they will spread out and become very flat and crispy. Remember to leave space between each of the dough balls on the tray. This will allow for expansion when the cookies are being baked. My cookies are frozen, so it's now time to bake them. If you're using a regular conventional oven, place the tray of cookies into the middle position of your preheated oven, set to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius, and bake for 8 to 10 minutes. However, if you're baking them in your air fryer oven, like my Breville, reduce the heat to 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 degrees Celsius and bake for about 10 minutes. But you should rotate the tray at the 5-minute mark to make sure that everything bakes evenly in this little oven. Whichever oven you use, when your cookies are done, remove them immediately from the oven. Now I'm going to tell you about the issues I faced using my air fryer oven. This is my first batch of cookies, and this is the second batch of cookies. They both face the same issue. Even with the reduced heat, my edges were still slightly burnt. However, the rest of the cookie was perfect, so what I decided to do was to get my round cookie cutter and just trim the cookies. As you can see, that removes the burnt edges, and the result was that all the cookies are the same size and they look absolutely perfect. These cookies are very fragile and very crumbly when they first come out of the oven, so let them cool on the cookie sheet for about 10 to 15 minutes. At which point, use a spatula to transfer them onto a wire cooling rack. To get the best flavor and perfect texture, you have to let the cookies completely cool to room temperature. And you can let them rest on your tray overnight. When it's time to store your cookies, you should use an airtight container and store them in your refrigerator where you can keep them for several days. Now, if you're making this for prep ahead for the holidays, freeze the dough balls on the baking sheet as we did before, and once they're frozen, put them in an airtight container that is labeled and dated, and you can freeze them for several months. These buttery melt-in-your-mouth macadamia nut and sugar-free white chocolate chip cookies are also a wonderful food gift. I like to make several different kinds of cookies and put them in a nice box and give them to friends and family. So when you're making these cookies, make extra and give them as a gift. I'm sure you will make someone very happy with them. I would like to thank each and every one for watching my videos. And to you and your loved one, I'd like to wish you a very Merry Christmas and all the best for the holidays. Cheers!